Thank you. And as usual, Noel's right on the ball. That's what I say to my children and grandchildren. Never mind all that study and practice the blethering. That will stand you in much better stead. And I am indeed living proof. A little more blethering, or no trick of debaters, always start with the title. And today's title is an interesting one. What do we need to know? Now, one of the many definitions of news is that it's what people don't know and would like to know. A good definition of news, but there's a difference quite often between what we need to know and what we would like to know. And in this particular case, what everybody would like to know is what happened on the night of the guarantee. It's almost become a national obsession. We would like to know who came up with the idea of the guarantee. We'd like to know if the two Bryans were seriously warned by anyone not to go there. We would like to know, did people lobby for a guarantee, especially Sean Quinn? But do we actually need to know any of that? And would it make much difference if we knew the answers? And my own view is that it wouldn't. It is not actually the central thing that it has become. And indeed, pundits and journalists have to ask themselves, why is it that so many people believe that the guarantee caused our problems? Now, there's lots of rooms for argument in all of this, but I can say without the slightest hesitation, the guarantee did not cause our problems. The guarantee was a result of our problems, and Donald's book goes through this brilliantly. So we have to ask ourselves why we have given people this opinion, which can never be changed now, that were it not for the guarantee, we wouldn't be here. There are signs that that's beginning to change a bit. People have begun to realise what would have happened if the Irish banking system had failed. And it would have failed that Monday morning. It would have failed, well, we didn't know then, 60 billion. It would have failed completely. There's not a deposit in the country that would have been safe. So you can argue a lot as to whether the guarantee was the right way or the wrong way, but you cannot guarantee that something had to be done. You cannot argue that something had to be done. And perhaps one of the mistakes was that the two Bryans didn't or weren't given the advice that Sir Humphrey gave to his minister on one occasion in Yes Minister. He said, "Oh yes, Minister," he said, "many things can be tried, but nothing should be tried for the first time." Sound advice. And my own tuppence worth is that it was in a way a reflection of previous Fianna Fáil successes. Hubris, it's called. Fianna Fáil has a tradition of dramatic interventions, not taken on any advice. And if they come off, you're famous forever. The great one is Donogh O'Malley's introduction of free secondary school education, where he didn't even tell the Taoiseach what he was doing, never mind his officials. And we all think that was a great idea. And had the guarantee worked, the same thing would have happened. But that's a dangerous kind of hubris, even when it comes off sometimes. Fianna Fáil could point to a lot of kind of things like that that had worked. And it may be that presented with the options, they decided politically to go a bit further than any of the official advice and be dramatic. But I mean, the fact of the matter is that the collapse in deposits doesn't happen then. 50 billion had flown out by the time of the guarantee, and it flowed back in again. Deposits collapse just before the bailout in 2010, and they caused the bailout. And they fell 20%. That's worse than Greece. And nothing remotely like it has happened in Portugal, Spain or Italy. And the reason for that is that the Irish banks were wrecked on a scale unlike anywhere else, and pretty much unlike anything in history. Goodbody stockbrokers drew up a list of the 50 worst banking crises. At that time ever recorded, at that time Ireland was second. I think we've now overtaken Indonesia to be the worst ever. I was very impressed by Argentina. 5 of the 50 worst banking crises have occurred in Argentina. They just keep doing it, but that's up to them. But we have produced this extraordinary one, and that's what we need to question. Not so much why the Irish banks failed. Lots of banks failed in that era and have huge losses, particularly the German banks, which are still nursing them and not declaring them. It's the scale of the crisis here. And one big unexamined question is the construction bubble and burst that went with it on an enormous scale. I mean, property price crashes, bubbles and crashes are quite common, and they're hard to quantify at the time and hard to stop indeed. But if that is all that Ireland had had, if we hadn't had 200,000 people building houses and apartments for which there were never going to be any customers, and like all building, it can stop instantly. Builders just turn off the cement mixer and walk away. Then we would not have the catastrophe that we have. We'd have big problems, but not catastrophe. And that is actually easier to see and easier questions to ask. What advice did ministers get about the construction bubble? What lobbying came there? Who exactly was responsible for the disastrous series of extensions of the tax reliefs year after year, 12 months at a time, which by the end, because it meant you had to start a project, people were ringing people in Poland to bring them in to start a house, which they had no intention ever of finishing, probably, in order to get the tax break. And that takes us, of course, to the heart of the political system. And that has kind of been a theme, obviously, of this school, and started off with the keynote speech for Emily O'Reilly, which got great coverage. And I think it's absolutely the theme of the banking question as well. And there's this general consensus that something is defective in the political system and that it's a root cause of what has happened. But there's not much belief that anything is going to be done about it. And the coalition, the government deserves, I think, a great deal of admiration for the many difficult decisions it has taken and the way it has taken them. But it has slipped comfortably into the ministerial driving seats and put the old machine in gear. And it has got it to work in many ways it didn't before. But if you believe that the machine is seriously defective, and I do, it will crash again. We have now bankrupted the country twice in 35 years. That cannot be a coincidence. And it's never, of course, quite the same crash again. And you spend all your time making sure the last crash doesn't happen. I'm very fond of a British poet called Wendy Cope because she's a humorous poet. But the line is, she swore she'd never make the same mistake again. She always made another one instead. And this machine is not fit for purpose. And sometimes it's better to think of simple things rather than these big issues. A story last week about the citizenship rules. The citizenship rules are so vague that a lot of people kind of don't know what to do in order to get citizenship. And then, at the end of the day, even if you admit all the rules, the minister has the final say-so. And there is the key thing. The minister has the final say-so. Almost all legislation is designed in such a way that at the end of the day, if it's going to cause trouble for the minister and his party, he has the final say. And you find this buried somewhere on page 175. What kind of a citizenship process is it that the minister decides at the end of the day whether you're suited for citizenship or not, when you have a set of rules? This is what we don't question. This is what we've become used to. And this, in my view, is at the core of these problems. The American President, Hayes, was quoted last night about government by corporations. But earlier than him, the founding father, John Adams, said that what you need is a government of laws, not of men. And what Ireland has always had is a government of men, and it was usually men, now it's men and women, not laws. The minister very often stands, the law is framed in such a way that he or she stands above it. And there was a bit of amusement a couple of years ago when Brian Cowan was caught on on microphone in the Dáil, summoning the Consumer Council for a telling off. And the reason it caused some amusement is that he used unparliamentary language. Everybody focused on that. Nobody focused on what business is it of the Taoiseach to summon the Consumer Council for a telling off for doing its job. We think it is the Taoiseach's business, and we call on the Taoiseach regularly to summon people. to give them telling off because we don't know. You saw it, Josephine Freer was saying last night, people complaining about the unelected revenue. Well, if you want everything decided by people you vote for, you're going to get banking crises and construction booms, and I've no question about it. You have to disperse power. You have to limit power. And ministers will have to accept that consumer councils and regulators can cause them trouble, may even lose them votes, but that's the way a properly governed country has to run. And so we come to the key point with the banking, the regulators. And if you're looking for signs of change, watch for the appointment of the new regulator to replace Matthew Elderfield. There's no doubt that they are tempted to use the well-tried and trusted system of appointing a civil servant, active or retired. That's who fills almost every sensitive post for the reasons I've just said. And if they do that, it means that nothing has changed and nothing is going to change. And it doesn't matter how good or honest the civil servant in question is. They're nearly all good, hard-working, honest people. They are part, born and bred of that system. And you have to ask, too, had the regulator not been Matthew Elderfield, but such a person, would the Quinn Group have been handled the way it was? Now you have to ask yourself the question, which would you prefer? Would you prefer a lot more taxpayers' money shoveled in the direction of Quinn Group to preserve jobs in border areas? And that would be fine. But what if regulations had been broken, as they undoubtedly would? One of the hard questions is, are there times when you put economic success and even jobs second to the rule of law, rule of regulations? I've come to the conclusion, a bit radical, that no senior position, including the Garda Commissioner or Chief Superintendent, regulators, any of these positions, none of them should be open to anybody who is not either a foreigner or has spent some time working abroad. Radical. But there are only 4 million of us on an island. The idea that we can get the best experience and the best independence by having the door closed. The present position is somebody that would never get these jobs under any circumstances because you wouldn't know what they might get up to. We have to ask ourselves, do we want them to get up to things and do their job properly? You can't hard to avoid quoting Colin McCarthy because he's always got the best lines. But he said to one of our failed regulators, he said, you must realise, he said, if they give you a set of black togs and a whistle, you're the referee. And the referee didn't do the job. To what extent was that because they didn't want to rock the political boat? To what extent was it that the game was rigged? Incredible though it may seem, there was, and maybe still is, last time I looked it was still there, a statutory committee, statutory, legal force of bankers whom the central bank have to consult. In other words, the referee has to ask the teams what they think of his judgment before they make it. Why is that there? It's there not to cause trouble, in this case to the banks. And trouble is necessary. It's the formal expression of the mindset that I think has got it in. So I'll leave one very hard question then. Do officials enjoy a tacit immunity if they have been acting on behalf of the state in their official capacities? This is coming up now with what we know about the so-called Maple 10 arrangements, where there were kind of share supports for Anglo shares. Now, I don't know if it was illegal or not, but it is not a defence, if it was, that the regulator knew and the regulator was involved. Quite the contrary, the regulator's staff should be prosecuted as well. And I wouldn't applaud because I've no doubt they were doing the best to the best of their abilities, and the rules that I've been saying are not clear. But one certainly suspects, and that is the reason for the applause, that if you were doing the best of your ability, as you saw in the interest of the state, that you also are above the law, and you will not be sanctioned if it goes wrong? And that's a question that has to be asked. So we'll move on to the second question, which Donald has been dealing with. What do we do now? Where do we go from here? I think we need to ask more about the kind of solutions that are available. To my mind, we face the same dilemma as on that fateful weekend in September 2008. Not concentrated into 48 hours, but the question is the same. To what extent do we protect the banks at the expense of the economy? Because just like then, there is no good option. And the guarantee clearly saved the banks, but clearly did a lot of damage to the economy. And now, in a long, drawn-out process that Donald has indicated, the same question is being asked. The more we help the economy by alleviating debt burdens on households and firms, the more trouble the banks will get into. And we may find ourselves, as he has said, at the point again where they are close to failure. And we may then have to ask to what extent are we as a community prepared to transfer resources to the indebted. The banks have had 10 billion. As Donald said, they're very slow, for obvious reasons, to want to spend it. But the government is not terribly keen on them spending it either, because what they're afraid of is when the 10 billion is gone, and if it turned out not to be enough, where are we to get the rest? Well, we can get some of it from our own resources. A transfer of wealth from savers to debtors via the banks would be terribly unpopular, but might in the end be of more benefit to the community as a whole than leaving large sections of the corporate and household sector with unsustainable debts. So my own view is that we need to start with the fundamental decision. Are we going to give generous debt relief? And if we are, get on with it, make it simple, make it clear, so that people can't game the system, and we will deal with the consequences when they arrive. And we have the advantage that the Troika has been telling us to do this. If we do it, and in 2 years' time say, okay, the 10 billion's gone, we've got another 6, but we need another 5, what are you going to do about it? There are solutions, but you need to be clear as to what you're trying to do. That's what people weren't clear of in the past, and that, to finish on the theme, is what we're not clear about now, because it is still being done secretly, quietly, behind closed doors. Now, it's a delicate matter. As I say, it's just the audience has indicated the idea, and I know this in my own household, the idea of those of us who didn't run up debts paying for those who did is not popular. The idea that the banks might again look vulnerable because of the losses that they incurred is dangerous. The temptation for the official world to do all this quietly behind closed doors and not let simple folk like ourselves understand what is going on is very tempting. But that got us into this mess, and I think it's a very brave person who would think that the same approach would get us out of it. Thank you.